Hi, I'm Chris Oldland, Editor-in-Chief of Field Service News, and today I'm really pleased to bring you the final part in our video series that has asked the key question: is data the fundamental building block for field service excellence in the 21st century? Within this series, we've heard from Dave Bochenski, CTO with Cognito IQ, and we've also heard from his colleague Dave Webb, who's COO with Cognito IQ. Plus, you've had myself and Ged Cranny, Head of Direct Service for Konica Minolta, discussing how Ged and the team at Konica Minolta are utilising some of the tools that we've discussed across this series as well. In the final video in this series, we bring all three back together and I probe them for a little bit further insight as we discuss all of the themes that have come together and wrap the conversation up with some further insight. So let's dive into that panel discussion. One thing that really came across to me across the three presentations was the power of data and its ability to drive businesses forwards. Ged, you spoke a lot about transparency and how that's brought a real raise the bar across the various different divisions within Konica Minolta and across different levels that you've been operating in. A question that I'll put across to the three of you, perhaps Ged, will start with yourself. Just how important is it, though, that data can flow from one business silo to another, from one division or one seniority level to another? And I'll just preface that with a second question. Can a business today, bear in mind that our audience will be made up of a lot of service directors and similar roles to yourself, do you think that we've now reached the point that businesses need to make sure that they've broken down those data silos, because otherwise they're simply not going to be competitive anymore? Ged, I'll put that to yourself first and then come to you.
I think transparency of data is important in the service world because we have a dark art, and to the rest of the business, we just look like a huge cost to the business. One of the most important things when we got the data from Cognito in the trial, we were able to show that to our FD and MD, and straight away they could see the value of that data across the business, and it took away the dark art of what we were doing. We've opened it up to anybody who wants to look into the top level figures, so they can't actually see the actual customers, they just see the top level figures within our business. So CX manager can see NPS score, anybody can see the scoring we're doing through the day, so are we meeting our SLAs, how are we behind on our SLAs, and that openness brings much more informed questions to us, and then that raises the level, as you said, of the engineers and the service management to answer them questions and make sure that we're hitting our SLAs because we're going over more, which does help, and it helps with investments. So for other organisations, I would say, the more open you are, the more chance you've got of getting investment within your business.
It's an interesting point. Dave, to speak on that last phrase that I liked from Ged was an open world.
Yes.
That seems very 21st century. It seems like where a lot of businesses are aiming to be, and it's great that you guys have already made it at Konica. What's your thoughts on that? Is that something that you're seeing become more and more prevalent?
Yeah, I sort of touched on it in my talk, really around needing to harness the field service team as a whole and really encourage collaboration around the data. And I think that is the nature of the world that we're operating in now. Is that it's no longer the preserve of management teams to manage the customer experience, to manage the performance of the business, to worry about dimensions of success for the organisation. It's down to all contributors. The field engineers, they are the people that interact most closely with the customers. The old adage of the trusted advisor is absolutely true today, and being able to share with the engineers the impact that their contribution is having on the overall performance of the operation, to ensure that you've got that openness of communication. What I've seen Konica Minolta and Ged and his team do so effectively is to make that performance discussion about the process in the operation. It's far less about people, far more about their contribution to the process and identifying those aspects of the process that are failing or could be improved. So openness, transparency, but also the way in which you engage teams in the discussion around that performance is critical. If you use good data badly, then you'll only get to use it once. If you use it well, then the reality is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get this kind of continuous performance improvement mindset emerging within the teams that makes a huge difference to the overall. It starts to take care of itself.
Which is always a good place.
That's the goal.
Yeah, that's always nice.
And it should free management teams and people like Ged, who can offer a huge amount of value in their interactions with new business development, key account management, and those aspects of the role. Frees them up from managing the day-to-day service delivery. They can focus purely on management by exception around the operation, and then really focus on, where's the next business development goal coming from, and how can I contribute? How can I make service come alive for my business development colleagues, for prospects and customers?
Okay. I think that's a good word, management by exception.
Yeah.
Rather than blanket Excel spreadsheet. The information that's put there, especially when we speak about the engineers have put that there. So part of the discussion is this is live data, this is what you put there, this is what the pushing that you did. You've got 7 choices within the workflow. As I said earlier on, in that workflow, it long lasts them at the same time. So if you want to make a choice that I'm not actually at the place where I'm supposed to be, you can make a phone call and be honest to your boss. And to be honest, in our organisation, most times we'll say family first, or you can push the button, and then it's your choice, and it very much becomes your choice. And everybody understands that because it is transparent. You've seen the caterpillar, so you can see each part of the process. And as David says, the more open that is, and the more transparent that is within the engineering side, but also outside of that, people can actually see the workflow and then describe that to your customers as well as to the engineers. Yeah, it's a great point.
Dave, a quick question just to take this slightly, the point around data to a slightly different angle on this. Because obviously in your role as Chief Technology Officer, you're somebody that I guess lives and breathes in data. One of the challenges that comes up, and we'll probably perhaps touch on this a little bit later as well when we kind of talk about some of the emerging technologies. I mean, we talk about data lakes. I often joke it seems that there's every other type of data to put with you. There's mountains, there's lakes, there's probably glaciers somewhere. Whose role is it now to be able to identify what is good data, as Dave spoke to? Is that something that you as a provider should be guiding someone like Ged on, or is that something that an organisation like Konica Minolta needs to turn up at your door and say, this is what we want? How do we do it? How does that kind of role work?
Yeah, great question. I think obviously the answer is probably it depends.
Yeah.
And to an extent, both sides can have contributions on that level. It's certainly true that data is the new arms race in businesses. Being able to marshal and gain benefits and insights into that data is really what can drive benefits and drive opportunities for you to beat your competition. So if you can harness that data, then the rewards are out there. I think that comes in then to two sides. You can have some insights yourself, but it also helps to have people from the outside also looking at things that maybe you didn't see about your own data. You can become a bit tunnel visioned on that. So absolutely, I see the role of service providers to help with platforms to bring that data, call them data lakes or whatever you want to call them. There's a lot of organizations that are looking to do that, which is, okay, let's have one place where we can get all of our data and make it easily accessible through APIs and other such interfaces. And then when we've got that, that means that really, and then I think this leads back to your original question, that flow of data between the different parts is available then. So maybe you have a particular vendor that can access that data and glean some insight you wouldn't have got yourself. It's also available to other areas of your business. And what I find is that when you have that kind of structure in your data, you get emergent things happen that you wouldn't have expected necessarily. Actually, if you get two different people looking at the data, you'll discover something that neither would have done on their own.
I touched there briefly on the amount of data that's coming from the Internet of Things. Across the presentation, we've mentioned a couple of different technologies, augmented reality, got a couple of mentions, I think AI and machine learning probably was in there. Is there one technology for you guys? And again, I'll just put the question out to you and whoever wants to jump in on this. Is there one technology that you think is set to radically change the way that service and field service in particular is delivered? Like perhaps mobile did five years ago? Or do you think it's a case that we're in this perfect storm of all these different technologies, cloud, big data, IoT, augmented reality, and so on and so forth? Is it that the savvy business takes a little element from each. I mean, if anyone wants to jump in on that.
Sure. I mean, I think field service operations are complex. Fulfillment spans, a broad gamut of different business functions in reality within a field service operation today. We have got an awful lot of connected machines that form part of the network and the framework in which we're delivering service, providing very rich data sets, but which can be difficult to work with for humans to spot patterns in that data set can be incredibly difficult. So there's no doubt big data technologies, for want of a better term, really do have a part to play, I think, in field service, where you've got so many complex and dynamic actors operating on the operation, then trying to piece together the specific relationships that are going on. They vary operation to operation. So in our experience, we know where to look within organisations and operations that we're working with, but the exact mix of context, the nature of the service being delivered, the customer base, geographies, all of those as a backdrop mean that each operation is a challenge in its own right. Overlaying big data technologies that can look across that data set in a much broader sense undoubtedly will have a big part to play. We're finding some fascinating insights into processes that have been traditionally highly automated in field service. So technology providers are very mature in delivering scheduling and planning tools within field service. But by looking at that data through a different lens, using some of these newer technologies, what we're finding is that perhaps those processes have been overly automated before they've been understood. And there is an opportunity there, undoubtedly, for savings in terms of efficiency and effectiveness within the scheduling process, for example. That point where we're bringing work and resource together that's most critical in the operation for delivering service. There is opportunity in that space, even in that most of all automated of spaces where algorithms have been at play for many years. I think for engineering teams, particularly and the guys on the front line, access to information and a consistent access to information that is correct in near real time, does place a large emphasis on mobile and mobile technologies. And I think increasingly in ways that shouldn't disrupt the activities that they're performing, it should really complement and overlay that over their activities in ways that simply weren't possible, even sort of 5 years ago. I think that's where the likes of augmented reality and so on will play a big part in the future for field service.
Yeah, with augmented reality, it almost feels like a little bit like where we were with cloud maybe 5 years ago, where we seem to be pushing this open door. It's just waiting. Everybody seems to be waiting for everyone else to go forward.
I think arguably IoT was a little akin to that
as
well.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that there's certainly a strong case for AR, especially in terms of getting the knowledge and the experience out of the tech. You made an interesting point there. I want to kind of bring this across to yourself, Ged. Dave spoke there about two very distinct sets of the field service operation, i.e. the dispatch and the management of resource and the scheduling engineers, which is obviously very much a back office kind of environment, and then technology that will enable the engineers. When you're approaching looking at various technologies to see which is the next step for Konica Minolta, do you have a strategic view of, right, how do we empower our engineers? How do we empower our dispatchers? Or do you have a more holistic view of what can sit across the various ones? Because there are different, some technologies may sit across both, some may sit very well in one area or the other. So
I was going to answer your first question, it's a little bit like taking a golf bag with the clubs with you. And you've got to use the right tool at the right time. So I think, big data, machine learning has got to be, in a way, our driver, because that's going to ask, and it already is, even with the low level I'm using it at, creating questions that 20 odd years of knowledge would have asked.
Yes.
And that's like shortening the learning gap for some of my managers. But that's given us a chance to have debate rather than create information. And then you've got to then start looking at, how you're going to use, for instance, augmented reality. We're looking at it from the fact that we started looking at it from supporting our engineers. So an engineer's on site, we've got a great skill set back in the office, and the guy gets stuck, and I want to save 3 minutes, because 1 minute in my life lost. So for instance, my 63 minutes going to 64 minutes as an average, that's one engineer lost. Yeah. So if I can bring that 63 minutes to 60 minutes without affecting the quality of the service we provide our customers, because the knowledge is in one place and it can be helped really quickly. So we started with that, and then somebody just looked at it and said, why can't we help customers? And we went, oh, we never thought about that. And then somebody else saying, when we were telling the people in the service desk and the first line and second line support service desk, went, well, why have we got this? Yeah. So the thing about it is, it goes back to that transparency bit, is we all work in little silos and we're doing something in a direction. Well, open it up. So we're using Yammer now to tell people what we're doing, and then suddenly somebody comes along, oh, have you thought about doing this? And it's quite funny, it comes from higher, so from maybe director level, but then it also comes from somebody who's in maybe logistics, not in frontline service. Our customers have changed. We live in a very, very now world. I mean, the other week there was a shooting or an incident in Australia, and at 7:40, I was watching videos of it at 7:45 at night. And that's the now world we live in, and people expect answers. So we've got to move to predictive maintenance. Yeah. The only way we're going to do that is with big data, machine learning. And I've set targets for within the next 10 years. If we send an engineer to a call, we fail. And I work in a business where at this moment in time, 14,500 incidents a month, right, is accepted, and it's good for its industry. But I'm saying in 10 years' time, it's not. So
it just goes to show the pace of change.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're living in a completely different world.
You've got to pick the right tools at the right times, and it may be, like I said, it's a golf bag. You've got all of them down, and you teach the skill sets, and you have the right people making the right decisions. But I do think, for me, the driver is information like I get from the Cognito system. I get that live, working on it. If I'm not in the business, somebody who's regional managers or the service managers can make a decision and talk to somebody else within the business somewhere else and say, look, I can see you've got a problem, and help each other.
Yeah, so I really like the analogy of the golf bag. I think to answer the original question, yes, I think it is going to be a combination of all of these things that combines. But what I'm hearing from my fellow panelists here as well is that what we're really striving for here is to reduce that feedback loop to become more real time. And we actually need pieces out there in the field, as well as analytics in the cloud, as well as human know-how and machine know-how, all with the goal of trying to improve that feedback loop and get that to as short a possible as time, so that we can be learning organisations and iterate quicker and quicker and quicker. And that's really what we're all striving for.
100%.
To
kind of reference that feedback loop as well, and also again to kind of talk across something that was mentioned across a number of the conversations earlier on, presentations, and also Ged, I know you mentioned you've recently introduced a CX role in the last couple of years. Where does the customer sit in that feedback loop? And I'll put it straight back to you. Where does the customer sit in that, and how important is it that they're embedded in our thinking when we're designing these processes, when we're thinking, actually, right, we need X, Y, Z data sources, we need to be utilising AR, or we need to be utilising Internet of Things capabilities, connected assets. Where should we put them? Should we kind of put them at the centre and build out, or should we understand the processes and then see how best to fit them?
So I'm a firm believer in user-based design. So absolutely put the user of the system at the centre. Whether the user is the end user, or whether the user, to what Ged was talking about there, it's going to be failure if you've sent an engineer to it. So the end user perspective changes somewhat there, but really understanding, what it is that you're optimizing for and who your end user is, and then designing around that use case is absolutely essential. The last thing you want to do is design something in isolation, wait for feedback, and then realize that your user actually has changed, and actually the whole thing you were building for is no longer there, and the industry's changed underneath your feet.
Which is happening rapidly. We're on shifting sands with the rate of technology, and also the more empowered customer that we have. Ged, maybe you can speak to that. It seems that the customers today, whether it be in a business-to-business environment or business-to-consumer environment, of course, I'm guessing you guys sit across a number of different industry verticals, so probably have quite an interesting perspective on this. but it seems that the bar on customer expectations is rising rapidly and rapidly. Is the solution to that, and are we going back to the data again? Is it making sure you have that firm understanding of what their needs are and their aims, and also so you can exceed those rather than just meet their expectations?
I think going back to heads of terms, where you sit in a meeting with a customer and all you're talking about is heads of terms, you've got a broken relationship. Yeah. I think one of the big things that we've learned is we've got the Cognito system, the data it brings to me. One of my biggest customers just never ever sees the end product. So they've got thousands and thousands of units bought. It's on a framework, but I go visit them on a quarterly basis. They've wrote SLAs for government offices or even a charity. And as I said earlier on, they're very different customer experiences at the end. What NPS has allowed me to do is actually feed back to that buying group and say to them, this is what your customers think. And these people didn't like what we did, but here's the feedback. And that's gone down really, really well. So my customer now gets to see what the end user feels. And I think we live in a feeling world. Yeah. If you go on Facebook, somebody asks you what they want for breakfast, and should I do this? Or actually, I've really lost my temper, so now I'm going to tell you, or I don't like working with this restaurant, or I didn't like this car garage, very, very quickly. So if you can get to customers and give them the opportunity to talk back to you, but then make sure that you talk back to them. So anybody in our organisation who gives us a 6 or below, there should be a manager on the phone within an hour and talking to that customer. Not to say don't ever give us a score like that again, but to talk and understand. We also ring tens, and David knows this, and he smiles whenever I say it. And it's not a lack of trust in my actual engineers. It's a thing where you go back to the customer and you say, well, Chris, thanks very much for giving us that 10 feedback. But why? Because if you give me a 10, loads more people give me a 10. So, if I could just repeat, what was the magic today?
What was the magic sauce?
Yeah. And it gives us that real live opportunity, and it really makes us think things differently. And I have to be truthful, it's been one of the key helps in our drive for quality. Our CX manager fell in love with it the first day she came into business. So Gina looked at it, didn't get it the first day, then suddenly went, wait a minute, this is coming in live. I went, yeah, this is live data, you're watching it change. So really pleased.
The light bulb moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but that's not our only point of contact to our customers, but it's a great indicator, and it's actually, as I said to you, a point of sale as you pass the unit over, engineer in front of the customer. You're always going to score high, about 20 points on average. And what came out in our actual survey service to our customers, so you've got multiple questions on NPS that Gina did from our CX. We were within 4 points of what David predicted, so David said it would be about 20, and we came out high 58, so we were really pleased there.
That brings us to one lovely final question, Dave. So clearly, the ability to call that pretty darn closely means that there is some correlation between understanding the technology, understanding how the technology can allow you to leverage an understanding of your customers, and then how an organisation like Konica Minolta can then utilise that information to raise the bar further. I mean, do you want to just speak to that as a closing statement?
Yeah, sure. I think at the heart of all of the client operations that we work with, there is a fundamental operating model that exists. Our goal is to place the customer at the centre, but to recognise that the customer is one of a series of really prime entities that you need to understand within the operation, and it's really the dynamic and relationship between those actors in the operation that's critical to success. No focus on one alone will deliver the result that you're looking for, and if you truly want to deliver exceptional service, you need to exceed the expectations of the customer. To engineer to that point means that you've got to be focused on all dimensions in the operation. I think, with that, it becomes possible, if that's designed correctly, to start to understand how delivery within different operations compares. So the potential for benchmarking aspects of the process, between different industry groups, etc., is an aspect of the future direction that we're seeing, particularly collaboration actually between our customers is something that we've been really surprised at how willing, and in fact in Ged's case, how keen they have been to drive that interaction with peers, often in different industry sectors, but seeking to understand aspects of performance in their process. How does that compare? What is it that one organisation in a B2C setting might be finding out about how best to deliver service that someone in the B2B space may not have come across and can adopt? So yeah.
Perfect. A great answer to finish off what's been a fantastic session. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening in. It's just for me to say thank you to our 3 guests and panelists on this session. So thank you very much. David Bochenski, CTO, Cognito IQ, Ged Cranny, Head of Direct Field Service, Konica Minolta, and Dave Webb, COO, Cognito IQ. My name is Chris Oldland. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Field Service News, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care.